Welcome to downtown Flint. It's always nice to see a group of 1,000+ people come together here on our cobblestone streets for any reason, but especially for causes that benefit our community. My name is Bobby Mukamala, and it is my distinct privilege to stand before you today to guide us through our program. But first, a thank you to our sponsors, the Community Foundation of Greater Flint, HAP, and all of the sponsors that you'll see on the screen here momentarily, for making this evening possible. A round of applause for our sponsors, please. Thank you. It has been my honor to work with the Crim Fitness Foundation for many years now and currently serve on its board of directors. As most of you are aware, the Crim Foundation has long focused on improving the health of our community in the most traditional sense. What began as a race has evolved to promote physical fitness throughout our community. It further developed to promote nutrition awareness throughout our schools and workplaces. And now it has evolved once again, one step further. For the past several years, the Crim Foundation has been learning about another critical aspect of overall fitness, the health of one's mind. We have engaged in learning about this topic throughout the country, and we have built our internal skills and capacity to add mindfulness to what we can offer our community in an effort to improve its collective health. So began the Crim Mindfulness Initiative. This effort to improve health by adding a focus on introspection is now launching in all Flint community schools and will expand, yes. And this effort will now expand throughout the county as interest and funding allow. And judging by the size of this crowd, if this is any indication, we hope that this will occur sooner rather than later. When we embarked on the journey to learn about mindfulness and build our capacity, it became quickly apparent that there were several groups of people who have paved the way for us. At the same time, almost exactly 1 year ago, our community found itself in the national spotlight once again, this time because of the presence of harmful levels of lead in our water supply. It became apparent once the dust settled on the lead and water issues that we would be left with a community that had once again been rattled, this time, in particular, our children. As Crim staff were having conversations about mindfulness with thought leaders on the topic, and as the strain of water issues became apparent, our guests tonight took a keen and eager interest in giving their assistance. They became partners with us to help provide another tool which would help us emerge in a better place. Together with the Crim's Medical Advisory Committee that consists of myself, Dr. Melinda Wheatley, Dr. Anju Sawhney, Kirk Smith from the Greater Flint Health Coalition, and Marjorie Raymer from the University of Michigan Flint, the Crim staff has worked hard on putting together this week's activities that are culminating here tonight. At this time, I'd like to play a video for you from another key member of this Medical Advisory Committee. She is a woman who cares deeply about the health of our children. As a pediatrician here in Flint, her sole focus is to improve the health of our kids. And when that health was threatened, boy, did she take notice, with an intense passion that comes through at every opportunity. And given that she has been named one of Time Magazine's most influential people, there is plenty of opportunity for her to shine a light to continue to guide the care of our children. It is my honor now to direct you to the video screens for a message from Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, a brilliant mind that needs no further introduction.
Welcome, and thank you for being here at the Crim's Mindfulness Summit. I'm Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, and I'm a member of the Crim's Board Committee on Mindfulness. And I am so sorry that I can't be with you today in person, but I am so happy to have this opportunity to welcome you here as we gather for a very important discussion about what is becoming a very important topic. As you know, our city has been through so much this past year with the water crisis, especially our children. And that's why tonight is so important, because the whole community is coming together to create solutions that will improve the outcomes of all of our children. Tonight's summit features Jon Kabat-Zinn, a world-renowned expert on mindfulness, and others who will be sharing with you what mindfulness is and why it is so important for all of us. I am so excited to be working with the Crim, which understands how important mindfulness is for us as individuals and as a community. The Crim is and has been working with partners to bring the benefits of mindfulness to children and adults, not only in Flint, but throughout the state for the past 4 years. It is a simple but powerful tool that children and adults can easily learn that has been shown to positively impact the stress that we all live with, and who doesn't need that? This act of paying attention on purpose can provide tremendous rewards like a sense of calm, peace, and a greater understanding for one another. It can help us face the stresses we deal with every day in our lives. And when we are less stressed, our relationships improve, and we are also able to care for ourselves and for others, and we can learn. We all have big work to do, and I personally am glad for the support and leadership of the Crim. They have been here for 40 years for us, and they are still helping us set big goals and provide the support to accomplish them. Tonight's summit is an important step in starting a new dialogue for our community, one about healing, health, and hope. I know you will be inspired by Jon Kabat-Zinn and his generosity in being here to share with us the wisdom he has learned over many years of study, research, and practice. I wish I could be there with you, but I will return soon, and together with a mindful focus, we will continue the work of making our lives and our community more vibrant and healthy. Thank you.
A big thank you to Mona for her involvement with the Crim Fitness Foundation and for her passion for our children. So at this time, I'd like to introduce to you some of our partners in this effort to improve the health of our community by adding a focus on mindfulness. Grace Bullock is a research scientist, psychologist, author, educator, and yoga and mindfulness expert. Her work has led to the development of a global initiative to evaluate K-12 mindfulness-based programs. She has been an investigator in several NIH-funded trials studying adolescent behavior. She has taken the concept of mindfulness and combined it with the rigors of scientific investigation. We are lucky here in Flint to have her joining us as we take this next step in improving the health of the community. It is my privilege now to present to you Dr. Grace Bullock, who will introduce you to a few other key people in this endeavor. Grace?
Thank you so much for that gracious introduction, and thank you to Dr. Mona for setting the stage for this evening. But mostly thank you to you for your commitment to your community and for your interest in coming to this event to learn more about the Crim Mindfulness Initiative, as well as the future, because we're really thinking about the future. So you're probably asking yourself, why mindfulness? What is mindfulness? What does mindfulness really mean? And there are a lot of different answers to that question, but as you'll hear very eloquently from Jon Kabat-Zinn, mindfulness is a way of being in the world. It's not a program, it's not an exercise, it's not a concept, but it is a way of being and it is a way of relating to ourselves and to others. And I think that if there's anything I've learned about the community of Flint, it's that you are constantly in relationship to each other. You're in a relationship to each other in good times, your relationship with each other in difficult times. And it's those relationships and those partnerships that are what carries us forward, whether we're celebrating or whether we're grieving or whether we're rebuilding and trying to figure out how to make this world a better place and how to make this community, and particularly our children, flourish in the face of this situation. So mindfulness, I think, is one word that encapsulates really a very, very huge, but very, very simple concept of just being present and aware for ourselves, and also being in relationship to each other in a way that it honors the goodness and the light that we carry within us. And I guess you're probably still wondering, what does this have to do with what's going on in Flint? And my role tonight is not to tell you about mindfulness. Jon will do a really good job of that. But my job is to really communicate a little bit about what the science tells us about why mindfulness is useful, and also to tell you a little bit about the partnerships that we're forming with you, the collaborations that we're hoping to build with you to make this initiative successful. So we could focus on lead, which is in some ways the elephant in the room. But the larger issue really that precedes lead is stress. And stress, even in the most resilient of communities and the most resilient of relationships, can challenge us. It can challenge us in many different ways, physiological ways, in terms of our bodies, what we bring to the world. So sometimes I say stress is like drinking 10 cups of coffee all the time and not eating. So we're just constantly, does anyone understand? Can you tell me if you've been stressed or experiencing stress? Show of hands. Okay, so there are a few stress experts in the room. So stress and lead, interestingly enough, affect developing brains in fairly similar ways. There are a number of structures in particular that the lead research shows and the stress research show that are affected by stress. It's particularly poignant for children because, as you know, children's brains are developing. So that's really a key time to intervene and teach mindfulness skills. But guess what? There's good news. Your brains are plastic. So it doesn't matter if you're 3, 30, or 93. You can live in a mindful way that will help you to combat the effects of stress. So stress affects a couple of key areas. One is called the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is in the midbrain, and it's responsible for several key functions around learning and memory, and also emotion regulation. And so stress and the hippocampus are not friends. In fact, stress can be really, really deleterious to the hippocampus. And so one of the things that mindfulness practices do, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, is that they help to strengthen the hippocampus. So, when you're stressed and you can't remember things, and you go into one room and then you're like, I can't remember why I went there, and then you go to another room and then you forget your keys and you're like, oh my God. Anyone have that experience? All right, I'm hoping it's just not me aging, but so that in some parts is your hippocampus, and when you're stressed, you probably notice that structure, you probably don't notice the structure's not functioning properly, but you notice your behavior has changed. So one of the things we're learning in the neuroscience research that looks at people who have regular mindfulness practices is that their hippocampus is strengthened. In kids, that's particularly important because, as you can imagine, learning and memory are huge pieces of their success, not only academically, but socially. So if you're not learning how to be social in appropriate ways in the world, if you can't remember how to do that, obviously that's an issue. There's even, how do I say this? The brain is important in all its various forms, but the hippocampus is an important structure. And the other one that we're seeing that's affected by stress and lead exposure is this entire region called the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is basically called the executive control center of the brain. And so it's kind of like, you have a guy who's sitting on this ear and a guy who's sitting on this ear, and this guy's kind of going, crazy. And this guy's saying, it's okay, man, we got this, we're cool. So the executive functioning system is the guy that's sitting on your ear. Some of you guys remember Looney Tunes back in the day where, they'd have like the guys in each ear. The guy in this ear is the one that's keeping you calm, that's helping you listen, that's helping you plan and reason and understand what's going on around you. So if you can imagine being a child or being an adult who's stressed, that particular structure in the brain either becomes smaller, or it's actually a series of structures, but some of those structures, like the anterior cingulate cortex, the mediolateral prefrontal cortex, etc., some of those structures actually shrink. And the really important part is that all these structures are interconnected, And some of those connections actually weaken or disappear altogether when we're under states of stress or when we've been exposed to lead. Now, this is more appropriate for children because children actually absorb more lead into their system than adults do. So when Crim asked me to begin this journey with all of you, I studied lead intensively, and I kept thinking to myself, how does this mindfulness thing relate to lead? I'd been studying stress for a long time, so it was really, really clear to me that mindfulness practices of various forms can help to strengthen that hippocampus, the learning and memory structure, and we're having sufficient evidence to show that it also strengthens the prefrontal cortex. So I'm thinking, cool, we're all stressed. We know that mindfulness practice will help strengthen the parts of our brain that are stressed. We also know, through a considerable amount of research, that for those of us who are stressed, and there are a few of you in the room that raised your hands, that it actually helps us to relax. It helps us to take a pause between that really stressful event and how we react to that really stressful event. So it's incredibly useful. Then I started looking at lead because obviously lead exposure is a big issue, particularly for our children. And I was really blown away to find that the research in lead shows that this prefrontal cortex, which is really important, as you know, is directly affected by lead. Then I looked at the mindfulness literature and I saw that consistent mindfulness practice actually strengthens the structures that may have been affected by lead exposure. That's cool. So we understand that this is just one piece of a very, very complex puzzle. But those of us who are here and the partners in this room and the Crim and the medical community that's supporting this, including Dr. Mona, are becoming aware of and coming to realize that these mindfulness practices for our children are incredibly important and may help to not only buffer the effects of lead, but also buffer the effects of stress that we're all experiencing. That's really important. So it's not just that we're going to encourage the children of Flint to engage in a mindful way in a mindful community, but we're going to encourage you, the people of Flint, to also consider what these practices can do in your lives. So again, we're still looking at the mystery of what is mindfulness. Does that mean I have to sit and meditate? Does that mean I have to spend 8 hours on the yoga mat a week? What does that mean? And I had a really interesting conversation with Cliff Turner earlier. And Cliff Turner is one of the members of the board. You may know him. And Cliff was telling me that when his kids were young, which Cliff, I'm not going to out how many years ago that was, but we'll just say a ways back. Cliff said, you know, when my kids were young, we did this blue sky exercise. And I said, that's really cool. What's the blue sky exercise? And he said, I used to tell my children to just imagine when they're in a state of stress or, they're concerned, just visualize a blue sky. And how does that make you feel? And his kids went on to be all-star athletes, and we didn't even get into the history, but his kids are doing really, really well, and they're still doing the blue sky exercise. And the point is that we all carry this ability to be mindful. I live in a place where I have the privilege of going out and walking in a forest. That's a big part of my practice. You can be mindful anywhere. It's a way of being. It's a way of relating to yourself and to the world. So I'm going to let Jon continue to cover that. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about the partnership. So I was very blessed and privileged to be invited by the Crim and Jerry in particular to join this community and this partnership to support what's going on here in Flint. And I have to say that it's humbling. It is truly humbling, but it's also incredibly inspirational. And so as we were building all of the pieces, we came across some partners. And I have to say, in spending time with these partners, the Crim partners, the Crim staff, partners at MSU, and partners from all over the country, I am endlessly inspired by their enthusiasm and by their brilliance and by the programs that they bring and that they are offering. And they are generously offering these programs to the community in the hope that we will work with you as partners, we will collaborate with you as a group, as a collective, to bring these practices. And again, it could be blue sky. It could be taking a walk mindfully. It could be eating a raisin, which is one of my favorites, actually. It could be anything you want it to be, but you need to join and agree to participate. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the partners because they're here and I want to introduce them. But there are 3 programs that are being seamlessly interwoven that we will be bringing into Flint Community Schools and beyond as resources continue to hopefully amass. And the first program is called Mind Up. And Mind Up has been around for quite a while. It has been empirically tested. It's evidence-based. It supports children and educators so that we're not just focusing on kids because kids spend a tremendous amount of time in the schools. We're actually supporting administrators and staff and the people that children work with. So that's one important piece of the puzzle. Then there's another program called Inner Explorer, which is a web-based program that brings practices to children every single day in the classroom for 5 or 10 minutes. So it's easily accessible. And I apologize, I'm not doing them justice, but they're brilliant programs. And the third one is called Yoga Ed. And Yoga Ed brings mindful movement into the classroom so that children can learn to embody mindfulness and not just have it be an intellectual concept. So each one of these pieces brings together very, very important tools for us to use in education and also in the community. And these tools will continue to be expanded beyond the classroom, as you'll see over time. So it's my privilege to introduce each one of these partners to you so that you can see them in person. And I'm going to start with Lori Coots, who is the CEO of Mind Up. So, and next, I'm privileged to introduce Laura Baykosh, who's the CEO of Inner Explorer. And not least or last by any measure, I'd like to introduce Bryn Caldana. And Bryn is the yoga ed person in our team, and we're very, very grateful to have her. So I think it's really important that we put a human component to this story, and unfortunately, due to time, we don't each have the opportunity to tell you our personal stories around why we do what we do and why these programs are important. But I'm going to invite Tara Guber, who's the founder of Yoga Ed, to tell you a little bit about her personal story and what inspired her to bring this work to you. So Tara.
Mindfulness. See, she's not stressed, she's calm, she's going to her seat. I just want to say how inspiring this is for me to be here. That in my 35 years in service to children in education, I was told many times that my dream would never come true, that it was impossible. Always at the heart of my dream was to bring the benefits of yoga to children in schools. And so I needed a school to do this, because we know about schools. They take everything away, they have no money, they have no time, and it's pathetic, and it makes me annoyed. And so I needed a school. In 1995, I secured the donation of a $6 million factory site in South Central LA, right where the riots were. And with CSU Education Department and creating a board, we raised $54 million to build a school, and it's called the Accelerated School. In 1998, we opened a state-of-the-art K-12 academy, the first high school built in LA in 30 years. So we wanted to bring the benefits of yoga to the students of the Accelerated School and the community. Well, within 1 year, Yoga Ed was born. The first intercurricular yoga school program, and that yoga was a part of these students' daily practice. Well, that made a very big difference because all the teachers chose to have tests right after yoga. Now, Yoga Ed is active in hundreds of schools internationally and recognized as the leading yoga in schools program in the nation. The greater Flint community inspires me. You face challenges with courage, commitment, compassion, and vision. Most important, this community, the Crim Foundation, recognizes the importance and power of partnership, as we see here in the room tonight. This is my most important message to you. Each one of us must be a model for the change we wish to see in our children and in each other. Each of us must be self-aware. We must embrace responsibility. We must act with compassion, live in service to each other and to our community. I celebrate the bold vision of the Crim Foundation and its partners for your commitment to the health and wellness of your children and all of your community. You are a model of enlightened leadership for the nation, and I am proud to be here with you and to support this visionary program. I want to thank everybody from Crim for making this possible, because I think that this is a leading program that everybody in the nation should have in their schools. So thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for being here.
You know, as I was sitting there listening to people who might not have ever been to Flint before reflect upon what it's like to be here, it's always wonderful to welcome newcomers so they can witness firsthand what we have come to know is our indomitable spirit. So thank you, Grace, Lori, Laura, Bryn, and Tara, for all of your work leading up to this point. And thank you in advance for applying what you know here in Flint to help us emerge a stronger community. Another round of applause for that group, please. It is now my honor to introduce you to a pioneer in the study of mindfulness, Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn. I haven't said anything yet. His bio is in your material for tonight, and as you can see from it, his path has taken him from a PhD in molecular biology to being a leader in the field of mindfulness for several decades. He is world-renowned for his work on his topics, and his books, including Wherever You Go, There You Are, have been translated into 40 languages. Jon took notice of Flint last year when we were in the national spotlight. Unlike so many who offered sympathy, Jon offered help. His work spans several decades. His knowledge has catalyzed interest everywhere, and it would be impossible for him to speak in all of the places where he is invited. In fact, only a small fraction have the benefit of hearing from him in person. So indeed, we are lucky to host him here today. He is a silver lining on our recent clouds, because, as he famously said, and as probably is written on walls and desks worldwide, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. Ladies and gentlemen, here to help us learn to surf, it is now my honor to present to you Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction and for all of what's come before. I am so deeply moved to be here and also deeply moved to see so many people in this room on a Thursday night. I'm sure you all have, if this were any other city, I would say you all have something better to do than come out for an evening of mindfulness, because from the outside at least, and it's increasingly so, more and more as mindfulness is on everybody's lips and on the cover of Time magazine, and it's mindfulness, 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 and pretty soon it's just like, empty of any kind of real meaning. And most of the people who are mouthing mindfulness have no idea what it is, which is one of its virtues because somehow it has gone viral. And it was my intention for it to go viral from the very beginning of the work that I have been doing in medicine for 37 years. But from the outside, and everybody's spoken about it, and Grace, talked about it a little bit in terms of attention and awareness. But it's very hard to actually pin it down with your mouth. It's really hard because it's not a concept. It is, as she said, a way of being, and a way of being in relationship with experience, inner and outer. So in any other city, if this many people came out on a Thursday night, I would say, well, you all have something better to do than come out for what looks from the outside a lot like nothing. Like this, for instance. And if I continued on this path of silence rather than speaking for any length of time, you'd probably all run from the room and find something better to do. Because from the outside, it looks like, well, he's not doing anything. And I remember sometimes when we do this lying down, and in many, many different ways, but I remember administrators from various hospitals would come by and they'd see mindfulness-based stress reduction clinic class in action, and all the people would be lying on the floor, 30, 40 medical patients lying on the floor, and it would look like they were all asleep. And it's like, and the administrator would say, "We pay for this?" They're not doing anything. So I have to work extra. I have to work overtime to sort of disabuse people of the concepts that are so easy to tag onto mindfulness. And so I say, I know, from the outside it looks like much ado about nothing. And the more hype, the more it really seems like nothing. But, Shakespeare wrote a play called Much Ado About Nothing. This is more like when you enter it from the inside, it's much ado about what looks from the outside like almost nothing and turns out to be just about everything. Is that powerful? And believe me, I would not have spent my entire adult life practicing mindfulness if I had discovered anything even remotely as powerful. And when I use the word mindfulness, I mean many different things by it, as several people have said. It's a very big umbrella term. It certainly includes yoga. Because if yoga is not mindful, it isn't yoga. So whatever our thoughts about yoga and how weird it is, or how Indian it is, or whatever, or how meditation is like, well, I don't want to be like a statue in the British Museum or something like that, some kind of cross-legged, full lotus pose or something. It's got nothing to do with that. It has to do with waking up. It's like when the administrator said, "We pay for this?" It looks like they were all asleep. My response was, you know what they're actually doing? They're learning how to fall awake. Now, a lot of time we get out of bed in the morning, usually like a shot, a bolt out of bed, and we're on to the day before actually being fully in our body and waking up, because what's the first thought that usually pops into your mind? I'm late. Right? You're already, understand this. You're in bed, and you get out of bed and you're already behind. So if you live your life that way, if you sum over your entire life, you could miss the entire thing or be driven to distraction with all the stress of catching up to where you're supposed to be, when in fact, maybe you are exactly where you're supposed to be. And that if you could learn to inhabit the present moment, which is the only moment any of us ever have, to breathe or to feel the body or to have an experience or to love or to do the dishes or to, attend to what's important. If you miss that moment, you could blast through 10, 20, 30 years on autopilot and wake up and wonder what happened before you drop into the grave. And the challenge of mindfulness is to actually live our lives as if it really mattered in the only moment we actually ever have, and it's this one. And it's not a dime store technique. We're not selling you anything. We're not selling you anything. And actually, it turns out that mindfulness is really a core human faculty. So it comes along with your biology. It's a capacity that we all have. It's a form of intelligence that we all have, and it's called awareness. But when we don't cultivate intimacy with our own awareness, then our awareness turns out to be very episodic and very fleeting, and usually by the time we're aware of something, it's too late. Now, in terms of whatever it was, all the politics and the decisions and the economic challenges that made people want to cut corners, or even people who should have known better and say that the water supply was not safe with this kind of a change, saying that it was, so that sensible people would say, well, if they say it's safe, okay, we're going to say. It's like, no, everybody has to be paying attention, and you don't actually, we all have to take responsibility for how easy it is to cut corners on every level, and then to understand the cost of a certain kind of cutting corners. And so mindfulness is really, my working definition of it is that it's the awareness that arises by paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. So paying attention, okay, I get that. Because most of the time, if you pay attention to where your mind is, guess where it is? It's not here. It's not in the present moment. It's in, it's in the future, right? And what's its favorite pastime? Planning or worrying. Any of you have that experience that a lot of the time it's planning and worrying? And then when you're not planning and worrying, you're in the past thinking about whose fault it was. Who's to blame? Or why was it so much better then and it's so crappy now? And between this preoccupation with the past and the preoccupation with the future, none of which is actually present, our lives get so squeezed that we miss the opportunity to actually see opportunities where we could tilt in a direction that catalyzed greater well-being, greater growth, greater insight, greater sense of connection. And a good place to start actually is with the body. Because a lot of the time we don't pay attention to the body, and those of you, how many of you in this room are part of the medical profession in one way or another? Raise your hands up high so I can feel them. Yeah, I feel you. Okay, so a lot. Okay, so, to a very large degree, medicine is kind of like an auto mechanics model of things. You wait until your car breaks down, then you drive it into the shop and get things replaced or tuned or whatever. And it costs billions and billions of dollars when we don't pay attention to that. So paying attention on purpose in the present moment, and then the most difficult part is the non-judgmentally. Because when you start to pay attention to what's on your mind, it's got ideas and opinions about everything, including how pathetic you are, what a failure, how everybody else is smarter, better looking, the right body type or whatever it is. And this starts in childhood. It starts in childhood. And of course, it's evinced in, the kind of bullying that goes on and the kind of, sort of teasing and all sorts of things that actually make some people feel better than other people, and some people feel like they're hardly worthy to walk into the school. And so it's really imperative that we collectively, and I'm not talking about Flint, I'm talking about the planet, wake up at this juncture of things, because we are facing so many different critical problems at the level of the planet, at the level of the country, at the level of everything that's going on in the world, and refugees and horrific bombings of children in Aleppo and elsewhere, completely rational, on purpose bombings of inner city centers, population centers, and that's all kind of like, oh, hum, they just blew away 300 children. It's like, we call that civilization? So I think there's a certain way in which we really need to come into our own as human beings, and the planet needs all of us to do that. And so mindfulness is one way, so to speak, but when you look at it, it's actually an infinite number of ways. So this is not something where, oh, you all just follow what Jon Kabat-Zinn says or what the expert of the moment says. But no, it's a question of like, what is your heart telling you? And how much could you actually show up or wake up or be embodied in your own life and entrust what's deepest and best in you? And so I'd like to begin this evening. Excuse me for a second. Whoops. I'd like to begin this evening by just dropping in, without so many words, to the experience of us all being here together. Because you know why you're here. You have better things to do, and you came. And so when over 1,000 people show up in the city on a Thursday night for mindfulness, it's a diagnostic. It itself is diagnostic of something profoundly healthy in the society. And the society and the city needs all its flowers to flower, so to speak, if we are going to address the challenges that we're facing, both as a city here in Flint and as a species. So let's just play with the notion. As I said, there are an infinite number of ways to do this, but for start, let's just play with the possibility of sitting in your seat as if in a posture that embodies dignity. Let me put it that way. Can you sit in a way that embodies dignity? Now, if you can feel what's going on in the room, everybody's sitting up straight. I did not tell you to sit up straight. But everybody, sort of sitting there like this, and then I say, sit in a posture that embodies dignity, and everybody goes, I didn't use the word mindfulness. I didn't say to pay attention. I just said sit in a posture that embodies dignity. But what if you sustained that when you stood up? And when you were walking, and when you entered the workplace, or you entered your home, or whatever, that you're already embodying dignity. That's what mindfulness is. And you can't embody dignity unless you're in your body. And if you start to check, as I said, most of the time you'll find that you're not in the present moment, you're in the future or the past, you're certainly not in your body. Most of the time where you are is up here, okay, in the head. And then we visit the body from time to time, and sometimes it's wonderful, and a lot of times it's terrible, and we have to tell everybody about how terrible it is, and the indignity of aging and what the losses are, and I'm sorry, could you speak up a little louder because I can't hear anything you're saying. And all of these things are real. I mean, so there's this incredible beauty in living life as if it really mattered while we have the chance, because as long as you're breathing, it's not over. And we say to people with AIDS and chronic pain conditions and every conceivable medical disease and illness that you can imagine, we say to them before we'll take them into the stress reduction clinic, we say to them, you know, from our point of view, there's more right with you than wrong with you, no matter what's wrong with you. Of course, that's as long as you're breathing. And what we're going to do is we're going to pour energy in the form of attention into what's right with you. Let your doctors and the rest of the healthcare team take care of what's wrong with you and see what happens. And this has given rise to a whole new way of practicing medicine, because it's like we're engaging the participation of the patients. And guess what? We're all patients, sooner or later. So what if we were to take responsibility for how it is in the body right now and really live inside the body? As you heard about brain studies and so forth, we're discovering new sciences that were not the case when I started MBSR 37 years ago. Neuroplasticity being one, epigenetics is another, the whole story about cellular aging and telomeres and telomerase, and how, you know, when we say, wow, that stressful experience took years off my life, turns out it's true. Turns out it's true. I won't go into any of that, but to just say that when we drop in on ourselves, everything is changing. What we're learning about the fundamentals of biology is that we are these miraculous organisms. There's so much complexity that your brain is the most beautiful and most complex organization and structure of matter in the known universe. Sitting right inside your little old head. Whether you're feeling a tad depressed or anxious or anything else, it's just remarkable. And we don't have any idea of what the potential is when the mind and the body and the heart beat as one, get together. But you know it when you see it. When you meet an embodied person, you feel something. It's not a matter of thinking. You're just like... So let's actually... again, establish yourself in a posture that intentionally embodies wakefulness and dignity. And then let's not have to have anything else happen. We're not trying to generate some special mindful state. There is no mindful state. Okay? We're simply being with the actuality of our experience in the body in this only moment. And since it was mentioned that you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf, see if you can actually surf on the waves of your own in-breath and out-breath. I hope everybody in the room is breathing. If not, come and see me later. But the breath is something we take completely for granted, unless we're a musician of a wind instrument, or an athlete, or a singer. But let's actually befriend the feeling of the breath moving in and out of the body. Not thinking about breathing, but the actual experiencing of the breath without becoming bossy about it and telling yourself how badly you breathe and how you have to suck it in a little. No, leave it alone. It's been doing its job for a very long time. So seeing if you can ride on the waves of sensation associated with this breath coming in and this breath leaving the body. And see if you can be at home on the surfboard. No agenda other than to simply be awake to this aspect of your own experience in this only moment. And you'll notice, probably after not too short a time, whether you've been meditating for centuries or whether it's your first formal experience of it, that the mind is not going to do what you tell it to do. So it's going to find some reason for objecting. Like, this is boring. I came to hear it talk. And then your mind will take off and start thinking about, like, what could I have done if I wasn't here? And pretty soon you're having dinner in LA with somebody. Or you're having an argument with somebody in New York City, but you're not sitting in this room in Flint, Michigan this evening. And this is like a fundamental instruction. The awareness of that is mindfulness. It's not like you were bad meditator. Bad. No, it's the nature of the mind to wave and to wander, just the way it's the nature of Lake Huron to wave with the changing atmospheric conditions. So if you become aware of your own changing atmospheric conditions, stress was talked about a great deal. It's like this unbelievable turbulence in here most of the time. The mind is like going crazy trying to figure out how to deal with this, that, or the other thing. So the instruction is really, really simple and really, really important and really, really important to operationalize, which is notice what's on your mind when it goes off and is carried downstream. And then even if it takes you 5 minutes before you notice, oh, I'm not on the breath anymore, just notice what's on your mind when you wake up, because that's a moment of mindfulness. You woke up, and now you're back. And it's this. And guess what? The body's still breathing for you. You didn't die. So we say, yeah, I'm following my breath. And I say, listen, the language is really imprecise, because frankly, it's not your breath. Whoever is claiming to breathe, if it was you who was breathing, you would have died a long time ago. You would have gotten distracted. Whoops, dead. I got a phone call. I have to write a text, and it was like, I'm completely out of my mind, out of my body, completely self-distracted, and the biology doesn't let you, whoever you think you are who's breathing, anywhere near the brainstem and the phrenic nerve and the diaphragm, which is doing all this fantastic ventilating for you. And let's not forget, we're only one breath away from being dead. So it's super reliable. I mean, it's like, when was the last time you actually thanked your brainstem or your phrenic nerve or your abdomen, your diaphragm for keeping you alive? And then let's throw in the heart. And while we're at it, why not throw in the liver? I mean, all of which is far more complex than flying, say, a 747. And it's all happening right inside. Little old you, little old me. So when the mind wanders, you bring it back. Mind wanders, bring it back. Mind wanders, bring it back again. So just staying with the experience of the breath as we sit here. Of course, I'm talking to you, and silence is a very big part of this. If you learn how to inhabit the space of silence, it's synonymous with awareness. Silent presence, open-hearted presence, it's synonymous with awareness. And it's friendly. It's not some cold, clinical, mindful. In all Asian languages, the word for mind and the word for heart are the same word. So when you hear the word mindfulness, if you're not hearing the word heartfulness, you're not understanding it. And we're talking about the neuroplasticity and the developing brain and so forth. It turns out that there are studies that take individual, 6-month-olds, and they show them a little video of a triangle trying to get up an incline. And they can watch very carefully, measure where their gaze goes. And they show them a video of a triangle trying to get up this incline, and a little square comes along and helps them do it. Just get to the top. No words, no faces, just a triangle, a solid triangle, and a solid square figure. Then they show these babies another video. The happy little triangle is trying to get up the incline, and then the square comes down and starts pushing it back down. And what they find is this 6-month-olds, that the baby's gaze averts itself from that. There's a kind of intrinsic not wanting to be part of cruelness or not being helpful or cooperative, whereas kindness is intrinsic to us. Now, language is also intrinsic to us, and my dear friend and colleague Richard Davidson, who's a collaborator and neuroscientist at the University of Wisconsin, is fond of pointing out, what about language? By the way, you might ask yourself whether we're still meditating or not. You know, are you still breathing? So what about simply being aware of the body sitting, and meanwhile I'm talking from time to time, and we'll drop back into silence. So about language acquisition, all of us wag our tongues. We wag our tongues, and the air coming out of the lungs, in concert with the lips and the tongue, we create patterns of movement in the air, and those patterns, as I'm talking, are going through the air to every single one of your ears, and they're vibrating the tympanic membrane, and that's, inducing all sorts of electrical signals in your auditory cortex and so forth, and you're following this sentence. No matter how long I make it, it will still be grammatical. I mean, that is miraculous. And we do it without thinking. So I just want to emphasize that our core intelligences, plural, are huge. And so can we honor them by, say, being in the body rather than stuck in the head all the time? And then be so worried and stressed and caught up in the turbulence that there's nobody home anymore to say, hey, wait a minute, let's actually regulate this. Let's drop down. Let's see what's possible if we don't take it all personally and get carried away. Now, that's very hard to do when your water is poisoned or when you have some kind of chronic disease or some kind of pain condition that is, your mind is telling you is destroying the quality of your life. And to a degree, that is true. But it's not the entire truth. We also have vast interior resources, it turns out, that are being demonstrated through science that allow us to actually take hold of these, tap into these deep interior resources for learning, for growing, for healing, and for transformation across the lifespan, starting from however old you are. And no one's too old. I mean, we've had people in their late 90s go through the stress reduction clinic, and sometimes you can see it on people's faces. They just look more alive after 8 weeks of attending. Excuse me while I clear my throat again. So let's drop in. The breath is moving in and out of the body. You've been hearing and decoding everything I've been saying through the air. And also thinking about it and weighing it and whether it's sensible, or whether you should discreetly walk out and maybe wishing you had not sat in the front row or something, and how can I kind of edge myself over to the corner? I've heard enough of this lunacy. And just dropping back in again. So here's an example of it. The mind goes off, you bring it back. The mind goes off, you bring it back. The mind goes off. And you're noticing each time what's driving your mind, because as you create more familiarity with it, you learn how to navigate the ups and downs in ways that really are akin to freedom. And sometimes the mind goes off and you're having a great time fantasizing or remembering something, and it's like, wow, this is fabulous, this mindfulness stuff. And meanwhile, you're having some kind of intense fantasy, It's like, here's the bad news. You bring it back anyway. You notice what's on your mind and how happy it's making you, and you don't take it personally, you just come back. And if it's a horrible thing that's happening to you, you don't take it personally, you bring it back. And see, working with the resistance of the mind that doesn't really want to do this because it's so unruly, and what you're doing is training your own capacity for awareness. And the non-judgmental part's the hardest because we have ideas and opinions about everything. So, well, I like this moment, but I don't like that moment. And what if you could just be, just for one moment, and suspend the judging? Just suspend it. You don't have to abandon it, but suspend it and look at it. And maybe even ask yourself, who is it that likes this and doesn't like that? Because the fundamental concern here is really who's living, who's breathing, who's meditating. If we've already established that it's not who you think you are, because who you think you are isn't reliable enough to keep you breathing for 70 or 80 or 90 years, then who's you? Who are you? That's a really, really important question. And it's not one that needs to be answered. It needs more to be inquired into lovingly your whole life, befriending the mystery of being in a human body, being in relationship to all these other people, your particular family, and then the larger world and so forth. A lot of it positive, a lot of it's very stressful or negative. And how do I navigate in a way that optimizes well-being and health, and also not just for me, but of the community, and then attenuates as best we can the impulse to always have it be about me and to never like it unless it's going my way. And probably most of us have recognized that, hey, sometimes it goes my way and sometimes it doesn't go my way. And so the mind is very unreliable in this regard. And it falls into habits that whoever you are, it's not who you think you are. And who you think you are is far more beautiful, far more powerful, far more, And then, of course, issues come up. I know that, we live in a very, in some sense, segregated societies, and we've been seeing the, things on television that are almost impossible to watch, of people being gunned down simply because they're African American and male, even with the hands up and so forth. And, so that we have to look, if we're cultivating mindfulness, at what's called implicit bias. We all have, if not outright racial bias, we have implicit biases. It's time that we actually put the welcome mat out for that and honored it and recognized it and learned how to exercise the muscle of restraint and clarity so that we don't see each other as threats in a way that in certain circumstances is going to wind up with people dead in the road. And our communities are very, very segregated on the basis of, economic inequality and things like that. And these things are an important element of being mindful, of being heartful, of recognizing the pain and the strain in our communities, not to provide some kind of magical fix or some kumbaya, solution, but to actually not so much need to fix it, but understand what healing a community would involve. And first thing is, see other human beings as human. Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, and it's like an element of our society that we've inherited through all these generations of choices where you could say nobody's to blame, or the people who are to blame have died hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And so it's not about blame, it's about freeing ourselves to be who we are, all of us. And that's what a community would be, where everybody feels that they belong, and nobody has to be a certain way. They can just be as they are. And they could be honored for that. And then there wouldn't be bullying in school. Well, that would require significantly changing the culture. And many, many wonderful efforts are afoot to change the culture. And I just can't say enough about, I've been in Flint for 40 hours or something like that. And I cannot believe what I've experienced in that time. I want you to know that I have just been, my mind is completely blown by what I've experienced at the Crim. I just thought it was a fitness foundation, some people are just into fitness. Sounds good, but it's not really true that it's into fitness. What it's into is transformation, into healing. And it's serious about it from a lot of different perspectives. And healing the wounds of the community, the deep ones that were long before the lead, and the losses from all the economic turbulence that's gone on here in the past 50 years. The high points, the low points, and everything else. And what is healing of a community? Well, it really is when we all come together and we learn to, in some sense, realize that we're breathing the same air, that we're walking the same earth, that all of our, we're all embodied in a certain way, and that we're, genetically speaking, 99.99% the same, no matter how, we appear to be. And this is, where elements of love and loving kindness come into it, like the heartfulness that we recognize maybe that we feel a little frightened by somebody that doesn't look like us. And then we actually don't project it out onto the other person, but we just claim that and we say, hey, I see that, and I don't have to be caught by it, because that's not really me anyway. You know what that is? It's a thought. It's a programmed reaction that I acquired long, long, long ago, and I've never really examined. Aristotle's famous for having said the unexamined life is not worth living. So mindfulness is about examining what's in front of you, and also what's implicit and tacit that you most don't want to look at. Why? Because it's too threatening of me. But who are you? Maybe it's not too threatening of you. Maybe you'd get rid of that concept of you and you'd be a bigger you. Emily Dickinson. How many of you have heard of Emily Dickinson? She's a famous American poet from Amherst, Massachusetts in the 18th century, and no one wrote like Emily Dickinson. She was like amazing. What she did with language. So I'll recite a poem, and as I recite it, let's hear it with full awareness. We'll just let it come in. Okay, drink it in, let it absorb through your skin, not just your ears. And it's about the personal pronouns. It's a deep, deep articulation of something. Me from myself to banish had I art, impregnable my fortress unto all heart. But since myself assault me, how have I peace except by subjugating consciousness? And since we are mutual monarch, how this be except by abdication, me of me? Have you ever experienced that you're at war with yourself? Anybody ever have that feeling like you don't like yourself? Anybody have that feeling like you're no good, or you don't like yourself, or you don't like your body, or somebody's got some? Who is that doesn't like you? Is that you, or is it the unlikable part that's you? It's like we're insane. We say, it's built into the language. We say, my body. Who says it's yours? Who's speaking? Who has the body? I have a body. Oh yeah, then who are you? What about me? So yeah, and this refers to kind of like, how many of you fell in love when you were a teenager? Raise your hands if you don't mind raising your hands to disclose that when you were a teenager, you felt totally in love. Raise your hands up high, just so I can, again, feel. So it's part of the human repertoire, right? And then, of course, usually it crashes and burns, right? Usually. I'm sure there are some exceptions in this room, but usually that first love, and when it happens, the pain of it is so great that you say to yourself, I will never let myself feel that again. Does that resonate with any of you? That's what this poem is about. Me from myself to banish, impregnable my fortress unto all heart. See, I don't want to have those kinds of feelings, that kind of stress, that kind of pain, that kind of suffering, so I will shut myself off and banish the real me from the me that you see, so that I can be safe and miserable. And she realizes that, so she continues, but myself assault me, how have I peace? Except by subjugating consciousness. Mindlessness. We just go mindless, okay? We go on autopilot, we go mindless. I'll get through this life, and then it'll be better in the next life. Maybe. And then she says, but since we're mutual monarch, in other words, hey, who is owning this show anyway? It's not like we're all, in some sense, royalty in our own life. How this be except by abdication of the royalty, me of me? That's like very, very painful. So we could bring mindfulness to how much we abdicate ourselves, how much we ignore or deny or push away aspects of our being that actually might be intuitively and somatically and emotionally the healthiest elements of us, out of some kind of fear or just not wanting to, risk not being liked. And that would be a travesty. And then we wind up going through life not liking ourselves and then finding fault with the world. And then we've got a whole story going about how everything is. Of course I'd be happy and I wouldn't have any stress and I'd be much more mindful if only things weren't as they are. If they were different, then I'd be willing to show up. But I don't want to show up in this world. The world needs you to show up. It's not just for your personal stress reduction. It needs all its flowers to show up and actually operate as a healthy individual in a healthy community to move the bell curve towards greater levels of health and well-being in the brief time that we have on this planet. And, and of course, it's a powerful commitment. So in a sense, that's what mindfulness is all about. And there are an infinite number of ways to do it. As I said, it's not like you just have to follow the guru of the moment. No, it's like trust your own experience. And then, but it is a discipline. It's like, I know Jerry and a whole bunch of people at Crim, they run all the time, run marathons and and I was a runner for many years and then went into swimming and other kinds of stuff. And of course, I've been doing yoga since I was in my early 20s. So that's over 50 years. So, these are kind of love affairs. And just this, it took me 40 years probably to realize this, but sometime in the last 10 years, I realized that when I do this in the morning, after I brush my teeth, but before I do anything else, this is a radical act of love. To move from all the doing and the driven, never-ending call to be something else, or to move through this moment to get to some better moment, or to be on time and not be late. So when you take a moment to be, it's a radical act of sanity and love. It's not like, I'm becoming a weirdo meditator, or I'm tending towards being a Buddhist, or some weirdo of some ilk or other. It's not about Buddhism or any other ism. It's about being human. It's a kind of universal human capacity, just like thinking. But thinking is not the only form of intelligence. There are many, many forms of intelligence. And neuroscience is showing even more forms of more senses. Every one of our senses is a form of intelligence. But we can see without seeing, hear without hearing, eat without tasting, touch without really being in touch. Have you ever had a mindless hug? Not fun. It's like an execution of the mind. Some thought says, I should hug this person. Yes, I will. And, it's so wonderful to hug. It's like, let me go, please. So here's another poem to balance Emily Dickinson. Okay? This is by Derek Walcott, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature some years ago, and he's from the island of St. Lucia in the Caribbean, Afro-Caribbean poet. And this poem is called Love After Love. So again, listening with full attention, that's mindfulness. The time will come when with elation you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror. And each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to yourself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, who you have ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. In other words, who you think you are. Sit. Feast on your life. Can you feel that? You're unifying those centripetal elements of me and myself, banishing them, and you're saying, no, come here, come together, let's sit. And all of a sudden you're home. And you could be a home anywhere. That's why the title of the book that you were given is called Wherever You Go, There You Are. If you choose, I could have equally called it Wherever You Go, There You're Not, because most of the time we're zoning along on autopilot. But I chose to be optimistic, especially since the people who read the book will probably, in some sense, say, yes, I really could use a little bit more being present in my life and open-hearted and kind towards myself before it's too late. But you see, when we honor ourselves in that way, and when we realize that the story of me is a tiny little piece of who you really are, then we can learn to live in a way that really optimizes well-being and seeing beauty in the other rather than contracting with fear and so forth. And then especially with the children, again, since I was saying about language acquisition, there's a window of opportunity for language acquisition where if we're isolated, their children have been isolated from birth for some reason, or get raised by wolves or kept in a basement and tortured or whatever. But if you don't get language within a certain window of time, you cannot develop any kind of linguistic fluency. And yet we all have it, okay? It seems to be, or at least Richie Davidson says, it's the same with kindness. If you don't exercise the kindness muscle, or at least don't kill it in children when they're young, and then help them to develop it in school when they're in school, then they will be fundamentally kind and compassionate their whole lives. And that's not to mean that they're weak and wishy-washy or just like all kumbaya-ish. But it's like actually a profound strength. It's a profound strength. It's like, the core of what mindfulness and heartfulness really are is a sense of being a fully embodied, fully awake, fully interconnected human being. So that when people suffer, you feel their pain, but it's not like you take on their pain and now I'm suffering because I got contagiously bummed out by their suffering. But no, you have a much larger perspective to actually be of some use. Let's drop in once again. If you have wandered off someplace, or if you stayed with me for that entire piece, then to just once again realize that it's possible to rest in the aftermath of everything that's just been said and heard. In every way that it's, in some sense, either been taken in or rejected or judged or whatever, and see if you can just hold the feeling tone of what's been said. And the feeling tone of silent wakefulness with no agenda for just this moment. And just letting the intrinsic luminosity and radiance of your being radiate. Whatever brought you here tonight, something brought you here. Every single person, something uniquely yours brought you here. Is it trustworthy? Was it trustworthy? That, whatever it was that brought you here, that's like gold. It is trustworthy, in my experience. It has nothing to do with whether you like what I've said or that you resonate with anything I've said. It's like the initial impulse to come and even hear it is kind of a worthy opening. Not to me, not to Crim even, but to you. And so we ride once again on the waves of the breath. And when the mind wanders, we just notice that the mind is wandering. We see what's in our minds, we bring it back. So thoughts can be seen as clouds moving through the sky. That blue sky meditation is like thoughts are, just thoughts. They're not the truth. Your mind doesn't think very good thoughts. None of our minds think very good thoughts, but we believe them all, and then they sink our ship. The same for emotions. They're like so turbulent, but a lot of them, we're often so dysregulated by emotion that we get caught in spirals of depression, spirals of anxiety, and then we believe what the mind says about it. It's like we're one breath away from being free of that. And practices like mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, mindfulness-based stress reduction, liberate us when we cultivate mindfulness in those kinds of ways and put the welcome mat out for the full catastrophe, really, of the human condition, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever arises, and be big enough to hold it all without having to get caught in our own reactivity. Is that a lot to ask of yourself? Yeah. But what's the alternative? The alternative is to some degree step outside the full dimensionality of yourself and live on autopilot. So I want to say in closing that as you heard, I came here because I met Jerry and I heard about what was going on in Flint, and I wanted to see it for myself. And I have a very, very high bullshit detector, especially around things having to do with mindfulness. Because everybody's talking, as I said, about mindfulness, but it's very hard to actually teach mindfulness or live in an authentic way that's mindful. And if you're not living it, how could you possibly teach it? So I came here, and I have been blown away by what I've seen and felt and learned about how widespread the stepping in and saying yes of the community has been to dealing with the full catastrophe of what Flint has experienced, not just in the past year, but in the past 50 years, or however you want to date it. And I, have not felt this kind of vibrancy from a single community. I'm not sure if I ever have. Because the trauma of what's happened here, whether you want it to be just the recent trauma around the lead or the trauma of, General Motors and everything else leaving, and that is, incredibly profound, but it is also an opportunity to heal and to grow. And those of you who have stayed and have come this evening, and I think you probably just represent a small fraction of the people that could have come this evening, are carrying a potential here that I think it's true. The whole world is going to be watching. The whole of the United States is certainly watching. And believe me, the suffering is everywhere. I mean, if it's not one thing, it's another. It's not like Flint is in a completely special case. It has its own unique elements, but, you go to any inner city, and it's like, it's Desolation Row, and we tolerate it. And I think the time is rapidly coming, if it's not here already, where we need to not only think about the body and practice with the body and the mind and the heart, but we need to relate to the body politic in an entirely new way and practice the yoga of the body politic and the mindfulness of the body politic, so to speak. And when it comes to politicians even, there's a lot of things about like needing to get reelected, but if you're biggest motivation is to get reelected, you'll be playing it safe in a lot of ways when it's important to actually, have you heard the phrase represent the people? As opposed to, as long as it's safe, you represent the people. So I just want to mention, that there is at least one congressperson who is up for re-election next month, but I'm pretty sure he'll get re-elected, Tim Ryan, who wrote a book before one of his earlier re-election campaigns called A Mindful Nation. Okay? This is a congressman in the United States. So that's one congressman who meditates, who is teaching his fellow highly stressed members of Congress in secret, because most of them would not want to be caught meditating, but in secret, they're all stressed out of their minds. And of course, I don't have to wax eloquent about how dysfunctional Congress is, but he's from Youngstown. His district includes Youngstown, Ohio. It's like the Rust Belt. It's very similar to this, community in many ways. So, and I know that many people at the Crim relate to Tim Ryan, and maybe you've had him here, or you will try to get him here after he gets reelected, hopefully. And he wrote a book called The Mindful Nation right before his election. He got reelected by a very significant majority. In the UK, the Parliament has come out with a report called the All-Party Parliamentary Report on Mindfulness -UK, because they stole the title from Tim Ryan's book. And they are trying to, nationally in the UK, promote mindfulness in health, mindfulness in education, mindfulness in criminal justice, and mindfulness in business. And so I think you got the UK on one hand, and you got Flint, Michigan on the other hand, and the Rust Belt, it is extraordinary what's actually going on nowadays. And I think that if all of us, in some sense, put our shoulders to the wheel in unique ways, then the inner of our own personal cultivation of mindfulness and the outer cultivation of mindfulness in the community, in the body politic, that the prognosis is very, very positive, very, very positive for what will come in the future. So I want to just bow to all of you for everything that you are doing to contribute to that effort in this community, and to also really say how honored I am to have tasted for a very brief period of time how committed you are and how deep these efforts to bring mindfulness into the schools and to other areas of the community are. Because the bullshit is everywhere. And you do not want mindful bullshit. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, do we have time for a few questions from the audience? If you want to stay for questions, I'm happy to stay for a little while and try to answer them. I don't know if I can, but there are people with microphones around here, so if you raise your hand up high and keep it up, they'll see you. Raise your hand up high. You see him over there to your left? Raise your hand up and keep it up. Okay, so who has a microphone? Why don't you start?
Okay, first-time listener? Long no. But anyway, how do we move from mindfulness, which, I believe there's a greater, universal consciousness that, obviously we're looking at, but moving from mindfulness to action as we in this community try to, tackle what's been going on.
Yeah.
I mean, all the positive thoughts and everything, but how does that work from, the thought to getting us to where we need to go?
That's a phenomenal question, extremely powerful, because otherwise what I would be talking about is what you would say is like just awareness. So, okay, now we're aware of how, the problem, but where does action come into it? And the action comes out of the understanding, from the deep looking. So this is not a passive process of just being aware of how overwhelmed we all are with all of what's wrong in the world, but actually and I hope this doesn't sound like I'm trying to weasel out from a really, authentic response to your question. But in a very deep way, the actions will come out of your meditation practice. When you are willing to drop in whatever ways make sense to you, then new kind of insights can arise that say, okay, I need to commit myself in this or that way. And it could be a tiny little thing, just changing, something in your life, but the world will already be different if you make a sincere effort to change in that way. And then if you get together with other people and you have a community and you start to talk about it, you can take collective action, because if everybody just takes action without communicating, then you just have chaos. Thank you. And you can work on every level, from the individual to the social to the political, in schools, in medicine, in all the various. So who else has a microphone ready to ask a question? Hold your hands up if you want a microphone, or stand up.
You might not be able to answer this, but I think somebody in your front row might be able to.
Okay, yeah, that'd be wonderful.
We're teachers in Flint. And
Hey, let me just stop you there. How many of you are teachers? Raise your hand. Well, look at that. So, bravo, brava.
okay, so I know I'm not the only one wondering, when is this starting in our schools? When do we get training on this? When do we find out what to do? Please, tomorrow?
Okay. You're right, I can't answer that question. But you see, motivation is everything. So the very fact that you have that kind of motivation after an evening like this, that's huge. And can someone just answer that question? Take the mic.
Full district training starts November 8th. So there's a full district. And our team is coming in to provide the training. So.
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Tony, and I've suffered from a flood of constant random abstract thoughts my entire life, and I just turned 60, and when I was a kid, they weren't diagnosing ADD. And I found that when I quit smoking and started running back in '89, I had been running a fairly short period of time before I realized that it was the first time in my life that constant flood of random abstract thoughts went to idle. So
when you were running.
Right, while I was running.
Running is a fabulous form of meditation.
So in a sense, I kind of relate to everything I've heard. And what I'm hopeful for, or mindful of, hopefully, that through learning to practice the concept as you proposed it.
It's not a concept, it's just a practice. Let's just keep it as a practice. Because already you go into the abstract thinking mode.
Yep, absolutely. And what I'm hopeful of is that it'll free up my mental capacity to be open to new concepts, new awareness, or new connectiveness, and new ability to be more interrelated in healthy relationships with my family, community, society, and hopefully be of some healthful benefit to the time that I have left on this life. So
the place where what you just said is coming from, and the kind of aspirations you've articulated, that's been inside you all this time. And so for you to be able to stand up and take the microphone and say that about how easy it has been to get caught up in the abstraction, and now you're aware of it, that awareness is liberative. It's freeing in a certain way. And yes, you do have to do a certain kind of exercising of the muscle, but I think your intuition that it holds a lot of potential promise is profound. And once you kind of rotate in consciousness that way so that you entertain that possibility for yourself and you let go of the idea that you're 60 years old, which is just a thought, and because it carries a lot of baggage, that 60-year thought or 70 or 80-year thought, then it taps into dimensions of well-being, creativity, and imagination that could allow you to I'm trying to avoid the verb do. Allow you to manifest those aspects of yourself that are, in some sense, yearning to come out and be of use.
That's why I'm here tonight with the hope of improving the capacity to accomplish that.
Well, there's no improving the capacity. You're already perfect just as you are. All you need to improve is the access. And the access is every moment, or at least some moments, can you remind yourself, and if you don't mind my putting it this way, rebody yourself so that you actually have a snowball's chance in hell of being present in this moment. And if you do, that changes the future, because if you're present in this moment, it changes the next moment. And if you want to change the future, the way to do it is by occupying the present. And then every moment becomes a branch point where you can make choices that will take you to hell or take you to heaven.
I just wanted to say I could really relate to what you articulated, the mental condition of being constantly, endlessly distracted from the time that I become conscious in the morning. Not to sound religious, but that's one of the practices of mine, is that I try to pray before my mind gets up to full speed in the morning, because I know that I woke up with somebody that's going to need help. So,
well, let me just say one more thing that might be helpful, and that is that you could get the idea from a lot of what's been said that this is what the real meditation looks like, or lying down, or some formal thing where you stop and you drop from doing into being. But the real meditation practice is how we live our lives from moment to moment to moment. Okay? No matter what we're doing, no matter who we're with. So that's the real meditation practice, is can you be, if you're a teacher, for instance, can you actually be in the classroom? Can you show up 100% in the classroom and then see what's going on and maintain open-heartedness in the face of anger, annoyance, frustration, and how little help you're getting, and all of the, challenges, endemic challenges of being a teacher. And actually, as soon as you make that kind of shift, your students are going to feel it. And the tone in the classroom will change. I've seen this in many, many, many classrooms. And it's not a gimmick, and it's not a technique, and it's not a very subtle behavior change modulation kind of exercise so that you're really trying to get the kids to behave, so to speak. But when you actually get them to, love being in school and being together and interested in learning and dropping into being, then all the learning, in some sense, amplifies itself. You have less work to do in a certain way. And I'm not saying this kind of in some kind of idealization. This is to be mindful. Let me just say, to be mindful is only the hardest work in the world. I want to emphasize that. This is a serious discipline. It's very, very hard to actually string even several moments of mindfulness together in a high-stress work environment, or even walking down the street, because you'll be distracted, or you'll start checking your messages or texting or whatever it is that you do want to do to distract yourself, because there's nothing happening. Oh no, there's nothing happening except my life, except this breath and so forth. So it's very important not to idealize the practice, but to just let it, in some sense, do you and let it teach you. And as I said, there's no one right way to do it. So just trust that if you stay at it, life becomes your meditation teacher, and it will teach you virtually everything you need to know. How many of you are parents? Raise your hands if you're parents. Okay, and this is especially true for, how many of you are parents of children who still live with you? Raise your hands. I'm not going to ask how old they are, but so your live-in children are your greatest mindfulness teachers because they know you better than anybody, and they can dial in your number at any time and watch you go insane. And you can actually learn how to see that coming and fool them, surprise them by not going on autopilot and freaking out, but maintaining a certain kind of calm and presence of mind. And so our children are like live-in Zen masters. And the older they get, it turns out they may not be living in with you, but the older you get, the more challenging it is in a certain way. And it's really beautiful to see if you can't tune into the true love that we have within families, even when there are difficulties, and ride on those waves in a way that lets the love do all the work instead of all the fear do all the work, because there's a huge amount of fear and sort of frustration also associated with parenting, which if mindfulness is the hardest work in the world, parenting's got to be the second hardest work in the world. And mindful parenting, even... Thank you. How are we doing for time? Okay, is there one more person clinging to the microphone? Is there somebody who already... you have the microphone, so let's go with you.
My name is Diane, and I am a nurse of 40 years. And thank you. I work in a stress environment, a trauma-exposed environment. And this year, or this month, we will actually go live with a website that is, it will be www.resilientprofessionals.com. And that website is going to talk about compassion fatigue, lateral violence, critical incident stress management, and it will have spiritual wellness, and it will have body wellness like health, exercise, food. It will have all of those things, and I would like it to have a section on mindfulness. Where should I begin?
With yourself. And really, please don't take this wrong, but there's a certain way in which mindfulness can't be a component of a whole bunch of things. Mindfulness is the kind of foundation for the whole bunch of those things. So in a certain way, the mindfulness can influence and inform every aspect of your program if that is the sort of core of things. If it's not, then it's just one more quote-unquote technique that you're throwing at people, but mindfulness is not a technique. So this is easy to hear the words that I'm saying, but it's actually quite hard to understand what this is really about. So I would suggest to simply go slowly and to collaborate with people, if you can find them, who really know what they're doing, because they can help steer you in a direction that will avoid a lot of sort of frustrations and pitfalls if you're not careful. It's a non-trivial undertaking, but your motivation for doing it is phenomenal.
I will be listing your books, so I think that's pretty...
Okay. Well, my books don't do very well in meetings with other people,
That's true. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to stop here for the evening. So I want to just thank you for your attention and for... Okay. So yours.
Thank you once again, John, on behalf of the entire community for making the trip to Flint to give us a critical tool that will help us emerge stronger than before. Let us leave this place and know that we are flowers of our own community, that we will exercise our kindness muscles. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us near the conclusion of tonight's activities. Before we part, though, we'd like to play a short video for you, a video that was created in an effort to make the concept of mindfulness more relatable and show you what it looks like in action.
When I'm in the moment of wherever I gotta go after I get up in the morning, I'm in that moment of whether it's taking care of people or whether it's teaching students or whether it's just being with my little man. I get to be in those moments because I practice mindfulness.
I've been practicing mindfulness since January on a regular basis. It helps to slow down life and slow down the everyday life and encourages me to enjoy what is really going on at the present moment. You see? I
can see the middle.
These are things that we miss during our everyday lives. So taking time out to really look at the small stuff is something that I really appreciate.
Well, at Good Boy, we practice mindfulness all the time. Mindfulness is almost like climbing a mountain. And once you get to the mountain, you can see the whole valley. As opposed to being in the bottom, you can't see the whole valley. We design clothes, so stress is the killer of our process. When people give into that stress or that anger, they lose focus. But once you cut everything off, you can see from the mountaintop, you can see the path, and that's what mindfulness helps you out with.
I call him my 0 to 100 real quick kid because he is exactly that. The first few days of school, I would ask him, what did you do at school today? And he'd be like, we did breathing. And so I had no idea what that meant. I think it's really healthy. I can tell that it changes his adrenaline. What does your heart feel like right now?
Fast.
I am Maggie Wright. I teach first grade at Eisenhower Elementary in the city of Flint. Our main thing that we do in here is mindfulness. My children's behavior and thought process has been much better because of the mindfulness, being able to step back, think about things before they go on.
Considering the water crisis, these kids are facing all kinds of different stresses. To them, poison means a death sentence. It's not just unknown circumstances in the future, they're afraid for their lives.
This is called Warrior 3 because it's practicing balancing.
With yoga, we're in the moment, and it gives those kids that opportunity to escape reality, to escape their stresses.
When my grandma died, it felt like I didn't have nobody else to talk to. And mindfulness will help. Trust me on this.
Thank you for being here tonight. We hope you enjoyed the experience. We hope it has opened your minds to the possibilities that a focus on mindfulness can bring to help our community move forward with a more comprehensive approach to fitness. Thank you and good night.